Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you today to our webinar with Distil Networks and Qit. My name is Catherine Oberhofer, and I'm the marketing manager over here at Distil Networks, and I'll be moderating today's event. I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters and go over a quick agenda. First off, we'll have Edward Roberts, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Distil Networks, lead us on a deep dive into ticket scalping and how bots legislation impacts your ticketing business. Then Niels Sodemann, CEO at Qit, will cover how bots abuse on-sales ticketing and signs you have a problem. We'll round it out with the 4 bad bot vectors you should understand and how to determine the right mitigation strategies for premium on-sales. Finally, ending today's event with a Q&A panel. Please feel free to put your questions into the Zoom question box located at the right-hand side of your webinar screen, and at the end of the webinar, the panel will try and answer as many questions as they can get to. Thank you also to everyone who submitted questions to the group before the event. I'd like to note that if we don't have time to get to your question live, then we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards to make sure that your question is answered. Lastly, everyone on this call will also be receiving an email with links to the on-demand webinar and slides, as well as contact information in case you have any questions following the event. Before we begin the webinar, we'll do a quick intro of each host company. First off, we have Distil Networks. Distil Networks for the last 7 years has protected websites, mobile apps, and APIs from automated threats without affecting the flow of business critical traffic. Then we have Qit. Qit for the last 8 years has ensured online fairness during high demand online events for more than 3 billion consumers worldwide. Now, I'd like to start the webinar off with a quick poll just to get things started. So how much of your traffic do you think is bots? Less than 25%, 25 to 50%, more than 50%, or you really just have no clue? So take some time and answer this question, and then Edward and Niels will kind of dive into the answers. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close out the poll now. And here are the results. So Edward, Niels, kind of what do you guys think about these results?
Well, I think it looks like we've got a lot of people with no, I think we got the questions a bit mixed up, but a lot of people have no solution currently at the moment. It looks like, and some people are doing it internally. It looks like 29% of people are doing it internally. And then we have a multi-layered approach. 14% of you are doing that. So it's an interesting mix of how people are doing the bot mitigation strategy, looking at the question here. But in terms of how much of your traffic is bots, it's interesting to note when we look at sort of the bot industry in general, and we protect more than just online ticketing. We protect airlines and e-commerce industries, and so ticketing is one of those. But it's interesting when you look at what the bot problem is. You know, at its core, it's some automated script going around the internet executing something automatically, and so we define it by in an annual report that we do, which is the bad bot report, which comes out in the first quarter of each year. So if you want to read that, that's available. And what the numbers that come out are pretty consistent now over the last 6 years that we've been doing it, and only a little over 50%, 57% of traffic on a website is a human. The rest of it is some form of bot, and they could be split between good bots and bad bots. And I think it's good to understand the difference between what would be classified as a good versus a bad. So a good would be any search engine. So you want them crawling your site, you want them indexing you, you want to be found when people are using those search engines. So you allow that bot to go and scrape all your content and index your site. There are other system check health check monitors that may be there to say, is your site up or something like that, you may say, we want that crawling. There may be SEM tools that you have that go onto your site. You want those doing the job that you have. And so that would be, you know, around 20.4% we see when we see it across our whole network. But it's the 21.8% that are bad, that are doing things on your site that are malicious in nature, or you don't want them there. And that is what we're sort of talking about today. And they can be doing all manner of things. They could be stealing content, scanning for vulnerabilities, trying to log into using credentials to log into someone else's account. They could be doing, you know, they could be holding tickets. So it runs the gamut of things that they actually do. It's not a one-time thing. It's they're constantly there, and we see them across many industries. But if we sort of peel back the onion a little bit and look at it from a industry perspective, as you can see here, we've got you know, some of the top industries and how much bad bot traffic we see across industries. And what we see is you know, some of the most infected, I guess it would be a term you would use, or infested by bad bots, would be gambling and airlines, and ticketing is in the top 5. And so it's slightly more than the average, and we consider ticketing to be one of the original bot industries. So it's been there for a long time now, and it has been one of the areas where ticket legislation, as we'll talk about later, has come in and improved you know, and sort of trying to address the issue. So it's one of the ones where legislation is actually being used to try and help the problem. So in terms of a volume play, one of the things I think that's interesting here is that we see the gamut of bad bot sizes based on companies, really. It's not really fair to do just an industry. I mean, we've done these aggregates here to sort of help people, but we've got some companies that have 80+ bad bot traffic. And in ticketing, one of the things I think that's important to know is that sometimes it's not purely the volume, because in ticketing, there's a lot of human traffic too. So the human traffic is a major portion here. And in other industries, the human traffic is much less than what the bot traffic is. So it gives you a good directional view and look into it. But if we go back a little bit deeper now, and we look at these industries from the sophistication level, what you'll see here is that in ticketing, only 21.27% of the bots that we see are actually simple. The rest of them are more sophisticated and doing you know, more nefarious things and have more complex abilities than most. So I think it hopefully that gives you an interesting view into what these bad bots, you know, sort of the scale that they have. But let's talk about what they're doing. And one of the interesting parts about this is it's getting more and more focus on it, particularly from the sort of cybersecurity community, and an organization called OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security Project. And they produce a automated threats handbook, which lists all of the types of behavior to try and categorize what bots do. And the ones that really matter in ticketing are the 3 that you see here. So you've got scalping, which everyone knows, you know, buying a ticket with a bot and then trying to resell it at a higher price. We all understand that. Sniping, though, is looking at your inventory, waits until an event is almost sold out and buys it at the last moment, knowing that they can charge a premium when tickets sell out, and selling it for higher just because of the timing. So one of the things that they're trying to optimize on there being no inventory available. So they're definitely programmed to perform differently from the scalping ones. And then the ones that are the worst are the spinning bots, or how OWASP in their report categorize it. They recently added this bot category into their automated threat handbook, and it is called denial of service. And so what they're not committing any revenue, they're just holding the tickets in the shopping cart and reposting them while they're holding them onto a secondary market, and that makes the inventory unavailable until someone buys it on the secondary market. So they're putting $0 at risk at that moment because they're just holding them. And then once they've got a buyer on the end, they'll buy it and execute the trade. And they can now, do it at superhuman speed. They don't have to worry about timeouts, because they can just clear cookies, do everything in milliseconds using a bot, and hold the ticket again. Interestingly, as a side note, this is very common in the airline industry too, because it's got tickets, and very common in Asian airlines where you can hold a ticket for 24 hours before you sell it. So this bot problem is not just in this type of tickets, we also see it in other industries as well. And so what we would categorize it generally of what those bots are doing, we would say that they're moderate in sophistication. They're much more sophisticated than the basic simple ones, but they're not as sophisticated as some of those other ones that we have seen. And so, Niels, do you want to take it away with some good examples?
Yeah, I can do that. So again, that entire bot stuff does, of course, sounds pretty much like a dark web thing, and a lot of mystery about it. The fundamental here is still that bots are only like the tools of people, because behind all this here, where it is about getting advantages, there is, of course, humans behind it. And it's something where the people on the good side really do not fully understand what is going on, because these guys are, of course, keeping their secrets for themselves, mostly because that is predominantly the business that they're running. But recently, one of the operators called Wise Guys, operated by a guy called Ken Lawson, was actually caught by FBI. During a 7-year period, they have managed to earn more than $25 million by buying and selling tickets. And what was so interesting about this case here was that Ken actually came forward, if you go to the next slide, and told the world how they actually did it. So if you can go to the next slide. And what they did was basically operating a cube farm of people who were using bots to go in where the technical systems were most vulnerable and where they could get the largest advantage. And one of the places that they were able to use back then was scripts and bots that were super fast in low latency computer servers that went in and simply just reserved and bought the best tickets away. They were also able to fool the capture system that were in place back then by having a huge database with all the different combinations, and thereby being able to secure the best seats and then simply just resell them at a steep markup. But again, the interesting thing about this specific case were that they, Ken here, actually came forward and say, hey, this is the way we actually operated it. And if you go to the next slide, because that one is maybe one of the interesting thing about the entire ticketing industry. And one of the biggest myths is that you can sell out a stadium size onsale in milliseconds or seconds or in a few minutes. And we have done a lot of research around it, and I have maybe also participated in the other side of 200-300 different onsales at places around the globe, and it is simply just not possible to sell out in something that are less than 20 minutes when we're talking about a stadium size onsale. But the myth is still living, and that myth is basically one of the things that is used by the scalpers, and we'll come back to how it's actually used. You can find more information about the entire duration and the flow of an on-sale by going into the link in the presentation. Next slide, if you go to that one, is a little bit about sort of the bots landscape in ticketing. So first of all, it is like on the other side of extremely simple to go into a website and buy for a few $1,000s a bot that can actually operate in an automated manner to go and buy tickets out of many of the popular ticketing platforms. And not only do you have the possibility to buy it, but many of these here also come with some simple VPN services that allow you to use bots network, thereby hiding the identity of where you're actually sitting, your IP address and so forth. And the latest we have seen is that these VPN botnets are actually operated out of normal end users' computers that somehow is infected with some tools that allow the operators here to use the capacity of the servers. And again, like Edward also talked about, so some of the things that we have seen lately is that the bots and in very large volumes do actually not go in and buy the tickets, but the entire idea is to use that 2 minutes sold out myth to actually create some kind of false perception on what is going on by going in and just do reservation on the entire inventory that is available for a given on sale. But more about that later. So now back to Edward with a little bit of info on the legislation.
Yeah, Niels, I mean, we've seen that the sophistication and the sort of evolution of bots from, previously, when they first started, they were, they didn't care whether they were identified because no one really knew that they were there. So now they are mimicking as much as they can of human behavior. They might be moving a mouse in a certain direction that makes them look human, like they might be delaying clicks, they might be going through a website in the typical order you would expect. They might be pausing between clicks and things like this. So they're trying to mimic human behavior as much as possible and hide what their real intentions are. So these tools that you talk about here are exactly what we see of an example of them trying to do everything they can to appear human but also achieve the goal that they want, which is obviously getting more tickets. But interesting, let's move on to the legislation, because there has been there has been key changes in this, and there's more legislation seemingly coming online. In the United States, there was the Bots Act that was put in place in 2016, and it essentially has two things. It prohibits the circumvention of a security measure that used in ticket purchasing, and then it prohibits the sale of an event ticket obtained by performing such a circumvention of a security measure. So those are two things that it's looking for. And what we've seen since that Bot Act was enacted in 2016, we've also seen more countries come online with different legislation. The UK has had its own legislation. Canada, parts of Canada, I should say, Ottawa, have come out with some legislation. Australians have criminalized ticketing bots. So it's definitely rolling around the world, and people are looking at ways to use legislation to solve this problem. But I think some of the issues are in that legislation is one step. What we're seeing is that there's not much being done about enforcement. So currently in the US, the FTC has zero enforcement, but they're apparently working on making educational materials. So there's nobody really looking at this and telling you what you need to do and what you need to show to them, and do you need to prove things. There's just not anything available for people. And so this is, while a law and legislation is in place, there isn't any actual, teeth behind it as much. So what are companies doing in the ticketing industry? It's they're taking their action on their own. They're filing lawsuits. You know, FIFA filed a lawsuit against Viagogo. You know, basically trying to make sure they could maintain the rights and not have resold tickets at the last World Cup. We've got people trying to tie tickets to IDs from, you know, so that you have to present your identification in order to get the ticket. We've seen the creation of verified fan programs, hoping to make people more, you know, aligned with whatever the event is or the artist that they want to work with. We've seen this going paperless, so people having the tickets on their phones, and all of these actions are obviously trying to stop this same problem, which is this manipulation of the ticketing industry by automation and by bots. And so, Niels, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah. So the interesting thing here is, of course, that the legislation in these countries here have been pretty much going towards the bots themselves. But again, remember that there is people behind, and basically, if you do not bypass those security measures on the website when you're getting the tickets, you're actually not breaking the law. So the bots legislations, as we have seen them in most countries, is not trying to eliminate the way where a reseller can actually get to resell tickets. Interesting enough, and just for the information here, in Denmark we have almost 100 years jubilee of a legislation that actually allows the reselling of tickets, but you are not allowed to buy or resell a ticket above face value. And then we're talking about like a 100-year old legislation that apparently, at least in Denmark, seems to be working. The legislation itself does not sort of also address the relationships there will be between the seller and the resellers. And there is also that truth that not all tickets that are available will appear on a public sale. And then mostly on the international scalpers, it is, of course, possible to prosecute someone within your jurisdiction. But if you are meeting scalpers that are completely out of your jurisdiction, what can you actually do about it? And just to give an example, so we have helped in a number of BTS, onsales. BTS is a South Korean boy band. And even when they are selling the tickets in US or UK, we'll see an enormous amount of bots traffic coming out of South Korea, and probably are able to snipe tickets away. But hey, how could you actually come around prosecute someone sitting in South Korea? If you go to the next slide here, so the interesting thing here is again that there is a legislation, and the legislation itself will of course twist the way that the scalpers are operating their business. So putting a legislation against the bot and the way they are operated will of course mean that the scalpers are going other ways around it. And one of the ways that they are going around it is by using this myth of the 2 minutes sold out, then go in and do the reservations of the tickets, meaning that everybody who's then sitting in front of the screen and can see the arena, they just see like a stadium where there is no tickets left. And the idea here is that they are then pushing the fans into the secondary market platforms where they can buy a ticket. And again, one of the interesting thing here is that when you are talking about like reselling tickets, everybody sort of have the perception of, okay, so I have a ticket and then I can hand it over to someone else who then buys it. But again, it's very important to remember that a ticket is basically just an option. And in many of the cases here, the tickets are actually resold before someone actually have them in their hands. So the scalpers simply just driving demand up, hoping that they are then coming into the secondary platform and buy the ticket. And when the fan have then paid the overprice for the ticket, then they simply just find way of getting access to the ticket that they can then sell to the fan. So you can say that they are actually able to come around all the legislation by simply just reverting the order of the buying and selling of the tickets. Yep, Edward.
All right, so let's go into a little bit about how ticket scalping is impacting your ticketing business and work through some potential solutions. So if you look at how primary ticketing is impacted, one of the things you must think is that if you're a primary ticketing company, that you must have protections. The FTC is considering mandating that, you know, that if you don't have some protection on your site, that you must put something in place. So I think the perspective of a lot of people is, okay, we want to get ahead of any legislation or any requirements like that. So you don't want them mandating that you must put a capture in front of every request or every purchase, because that will impact your conversion rate. So I think you want to get in front of this and get solutions in place before that. You have to be prepared probably for having some audits in the future. They might hand you a list of IPs and tickets and say, can you tell me which ones were bots and which ones were humans? And you're going to have to do the work. They're not going to do that work investigating it. So you probably want to get yourselves ahead of that so that you can do and perform well in those audits. So much easier for you to hand over that data rather than have them coming into and looking at your systems. And then on secondary ticketing, you've got the part of prohibiting the resale of an event obtained through a circumvention of a violation. And so clearly this is an issue for the reselling secondary market. And so that's something that they're going to be looking at as, you know, how is this ticket being gained, and was it gained fairly? And so, yeah, being able to provide information to anybody who comes in and starts auditing this is going to be something that is going to be vital in the future. And so, Niels?
Yeah. So one of the things that are obviously happening in these days here is that the top artists have a very strong voice in all this here, and it's very clear that they see beyond the money side of it. They want the real fans who is loving them to come in and enjoy the entertainment or events that they are putting forward. And this is, let's say, again, one of the hope for the industry, and that is the very strong tone where some of the international artists is coming forward with, where they simply just emphasize the importance of putting themselves in front of real fans and at a reasonable price, and the price that sort of were the price negotiated with the ticket seller and the price that are sitting on the ticket itself. And if we go to the venue side of this here, the venues will sort of also be impacted by all this here. And venues are impacted because more and more requirements are actually put forward towards the venues who is selling the tickets for the popular type of shows like the Hamiltons and so forth, to be able to operate the sale in a manner that lives up to sort of the overall ethics of the sale itself. And some of the top promoters are coming in relatively strong and putting sort of restrictions and requirements into the venues themselves. And this is, of course, some of the places where, if you are a venue, that you can and need to cooperate in the entire setup here. Okay.
Okay, so this was the question that went up earlier, so I'll just review the results. What are you currently doing to prevent bots? So what we had was 30% of you were doing an internal DIY solution. 29% were actually one solution, so they'd had some one single solution in place, and only 14% of you had a multi-layered approach, and a lot of you had done nothing at the moment. So it's you know, it's obviously people are online are looking at what are the options available to them. So some interesting results there from the bot poll. So let me just go now through and we'll start sort of how do we see the world, and where do the bots play in on sales. So up front, we sort of split where we work, whether it's Distil and Qit, and solving the different problems that are happening here. So up front, what we see with Distil is we're looking first off at lots of accounts being created, and so account creation is a technique used by bots to to be able to, exploit a system. If you can create lots of accounts and manage them through some form of account aggregation, those are all done by, maybe one person behind it, but they may be managing thousands of accounts. And that's a very consistent bot activity that we've seen. And then what we see is the big issue with is the account takeover, right? So as you know, there has been a lot of credentials that have been released in breaches. So those credentials, basically people are using them across every website around the web, trying to find out if you have an account using those credentials somewhere else. And ticketing is not immune to that. So account takeover is obviously an issue that if you can get into somebody's account, you can, perform some sort of financial fraud. You can look at the credit card details that might be in there. You might be able to steal things out of there. You might be able to buy things and deliver them somewhere else to different email addresses. So you can create some sort of financial fraud. So accounts are the holy grail of a lot of online businesses, as we all know. And then the other thing, if you can get into accounts, maybe you can spam and add things to discussion forums and change ratings and degrade sort of the integrity of a platform that you may be on and do something malicious. So that's another use of how, when people get into an account, things that they do and things that they use bots to do. And then obviously if you can, compromise their identity, you can start phishing. More about them by, you'll see their email address and things like that within an account, and you might be able to, abuse the messaging system that is associated with many online businesses. And so account takeover is clearly a big issue here, and this is where we would say that the sophistication is getting on the high side, and because they're doing more. Getting into the account is one step, then it's what else are they doing once they're in there, and that is where the fraud and the damage can occur. And so the next step then is obviously going to the Qit side. So Niels, take that away.
Yeah. So basically to gain sort of the entire on sale here, the scalpers are using two techniques. So either volume, simulating tons of users, or use the speed to try to get ahead of everybody else. And I'm on the next couple of slides gonna go into each of them. So the volume part is sort of correlated to the having the multiple accounts ready. Not only creating multiple accounts and have them ready, but also use the bots network to emulate tons of different users. So what we're doing in Qit is basically be able to register when a bot is coming from the same device, and we can block it. And the other, and that is, let's say, even more important, is that we did actually receive, as you saw on the slide before, and you're going to see later, a key from Distil. So we know sort of the identity of sort of the session coming into the queue, and we can do it in a way where one identity has the ability to only book one place in line. And by having that limitation, we have a way where we can limit the volume. And another strong point is, and this is going to the next slide, if you are a venue or a ticketing platform, you can basically try to look at the economics of the scalping. Meaning that if you have a very rudimentary account system where everybody basically just by having a simple email can go in and create himself, you are making it extremely easy for the scalpers to create a tons of different accounts. The more expensive you make the validation of the content of the account, the more secure and more helpful you would be yourself to prevent the using of volume. And just to give you an example, you could go and require everybody to upload, for example, a passport number or a number for a driver's license. Therefore, again, not prevent that people are creating multiple accounts, but you make it way more expensive for them to do it. And just using the driver's license example, you can of course get 1,000 students to help you game the system and upload their driver's license, but you are probably going to pay them some money, whereas the simple account creation is free. The speed part of this here, we have a relatively elegant and well-working solution for that. And this is simply having a what we call a pre-queue, and the pre-queue is a page that is shown to the end user prior to the start of the on-sale. We will do like absorb all users that are coming in for the on-sale on that specific page. And what we will then do at the start of the on-sale, for example, at 10 a.m., is to randomize all the users. And that means that there is, first of all, no difference between how fast your computer are, or whether you are coming 10 minutes prior to the start of the sale or 1 second before. So that way, we will give everybody a fair chance of actually getting a low position in the line and therefore getting access to the tickets. But we will also make it in a way where the bots themselves will have absolutely no advantage. And then going to the next slide, just again, you can see a key again. So when the user is coming out of the queue and into the purchase flow where Distil is continuing to monitor what is going on, we are handing a key over again. And the idea with these two keys is that to make sure that we know who is entering into the queue, and the purchase flow afterwards can verify that the user has not changed the context on the way. Okay, so Edward, if you can take over.
And then I think the key part here is that being able to fingerprint the device, and that is one of the techniques that Distil brings to this of having this device fingerprint, looking at you know, various attributes, hundreds of attributes of that device to make sure it's a real human on a real browser, and so that you're eliminating sort of the bot frauds and the account takeovers, and then obviously as they get further down the purchase, credit card fraud becomes something that is a key bot activity. This is where the money is, and so tying that device fingerprint is vital. You know, you couldn't do that on an IP address. They're too easy to spoof, and you can, you know, rotate through different IP addresses, but your device fingerprint is very difficult to constantly change. And so then you limit the number of purchases that you can do based on that device fingerprint. So tying together the bot mitigation of Distil with the sophistication of the queue from Qt is a you know, it's clearly a good way of handling this. Now, just to tie it back to the security and the OWASP threats, credit carding, card cracking, and cashing out, these are all other bot-related activities that are done in the payment arena. So you see, this is where you see a lot of the fraud obviously happening, and there are different ways of doing this. And so, you know, every industry that processes credit cards suffers in this area, and bots go after this. And so it's clearly, the more you can tie, you know, that one that one device to an identity, the better you'll be at reducing the amount of fraud. So if you think about bots from a numbers game, if you can reduce the amount of them coming in and eliminate them before they start doing the activities that they're programmed to do and stop them up front, you're just reducing the less downstream effects, whether it be credit card fraud or abuse of your systems, you know, creating fake accounts, whatever it is, you're reducing that effect downstream. So so the key takeaways from this are, you know, bots definitely started in ticketing. Ticketing has been the area where bots have been most active for the longest. It's certainly an industry that we've been involved with the longest. And it's the one where legislation has come into place, and legislation is sort of leading the way within ticketing. It's not really in other industries yet dealing with bots, even though we've heard about bots in, you know, affecting social media and affecting, you know, political elections. We're actually seeing the most legislation in ticketing still, but you can't rely on that legislation to solve the problem for you. Next generation bots are getting more and more sophisticated. More and more bots we see are coming from mobile devices. So somebody's, you know, had their mobile device taken over, or mobile device farms. So we're seeing different techniques used and different, you know, levels of sophistication. As they're getting detected in using one technique, they're evolving and changing into another technique. And so it's a constant arms race. And then pressure from, you know, many stakeholders. You've got artists, you've got venues, and you've got, you know, ticketing companies. You've got a lot of stakeholders involved in the whole process, and that is something. So there's certainly going to be pressures around all of that. And I think one of the key parts and differentiators about what Distil and Quit are doing, we're offering best in breed techniques combined to solve this, to help solve this problem for ticketing, solving ticketing bots. So so those are the takeaways. And what I wanted to sort of say, if there's anything that you, on the Distil side, we have a lot of threat research reports. So if you want to learn more about what bots are doing, you know, we've got the Bad Bot report, which is like an annual report, but we've also got studies on account takeover, studies on the evolution of bots, you know, the new mobile bots that we've been seeing. If you want to go to distilnetworks.com and download those, please do. And then if you want to go and look at a product demo from Quit, please go to the Quit website and go through the process there. And so with that, I was just wondering if, Catherine, coming from you, if there were any questions from the audience that we needed to take care of.
Yeah, we've gotten some submitted and then some from the questions that were asked prior. So I'm going to open up the Q&A. Feel free to add your questions in during the Q&A process as well, if there's one comes around. But just Niels, Edward, just for you guys to know, I'm going to direct some questions kind of based on who I think it might go to. But if one of you feels like you want to chime in on the other's answer, feel free to do so. So the first question is actually for Edward. What is the most effective way to protect bots and bad actors that doesn't require a queue?
Yeah, I think you've got to have a bot mitigation strategy of how are you going to clean your traffic. You ultimately want humans on browsers interacting with your site. Or humans in your mobile app interacting with your site. And so you want to make sure that you're verifying that they're using your mobile app, that they're using your, that they're on your site and that they're behaving in a way that's normal. So that's where the first thing is, have some solution that identifies whether it is actually a human user doing something normal or whether it is a bot who is looking to abuse your site. So that is the biggest challenge. And so, you know, if you sit there and just distill it down to its core, you want to make sure you got a human using a browser or using your mobile app and not something else using it.
Okay. The next question is, what does ticketing look like in the next 5 years? Niels, that seems like it might be one for you to take on.
So one of the things that in the entire economics of live events is interesting right now is the magnitude of new countries that are coming into the global scene and where the international artists are performing. So we're talking about like Asia, South America, and so forth. And that means that the demand for having live entertainment is going to just increase, and it's probably going to be increasing faster over the next 5 years than the 5 years we have just seen. And because you have that dynamic and let's say limited amount of super top-notch international artists and other artists, there is no doubt that the entire ticketing where you sort of come in it as a fan and enjoy the artist is going to be a even bigger business. And with that in mind and the money involved in it, this is something where the fight we are seeing now against the arbiters and the people trying to game and get money away from the table is just going to increase. And no legislation would be able to really to come to the bottom of the issue. So that basically sort of turns it back to the industry itself, and that will require that the industry and the players in the industry put the necessary investment into making sure that the tickets are getting in the hands of the proper fans.
Okay, so this next one, that's an interesting one. I don't know who kind of to direct it to. Maybe both of you can answer it. But how do you determine the right mitigation strategy for ticketing on sales?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably some sort of combo of understanding the legislation, getting some bot mitigation in place so that you eliminate the amount and volume of bots that are coming in. And it's, you know, some form of managing the queue so that you can make it fair for users. It seems like it's sort of a combo of what we've been talking about today, because I don't think there's one solution that solves every scenario here. It's certainly an arms race, and the more, you know, technological solutions that are put out there, there are people trying to circumvent them. That's what we know. But I would assume that it's some sort of combo of what we're proposing here and constant vigilance to solve this problem. Would you agree, Niels?
Yeah, that is basically just going to be an arms race, and we will see how sort of the future will play out.
Yeah, I think one of the things that legislation, you know, obviously is the one thing that is growing around the world, and it's probably going to continue that trajectory. The interesting bit in the next coming 5 years would be what does what is the sort of teeth or the meat behind it, and, you know, and how does it become enforced? That's a thing that's very unpredictable at the moment. So I think people relying on that being the sole solution is clearly not the, you know, I don't think that's going to be the perfect solution for everybody. So it does behoove businesses to sort of take it into their own hands and look at other options that we've discussed here as a way of solving that problem too.
Yeah, but I think, again, one of the thing about legislation is that this is done by politicians, and they are, of course, reacting to the environment and their sort of political beliefs. And one of the things that are making all this here extremely complex is the, let's say, broad and wide perspective on how you actually see it. And sort of to give you the US perspective is that okay, I bought the ticket. I'm a person living in a free country. I shall of course be able to do with it what I want to do. So therefore, the legislation is not really putting emphasis on the reselling and the overprice itself. Where in more, let's say, social democratic countries like Denmark, to use that word, it is something where politicians can go and say, okay, we can actually bear that there is a regulation in the market and that are regulating the pricing on ticketing and tickets themselves. So if you have that very broad perspective on the way that is handled from the legislative perspective, there's not going to be one single solution to that specific problem.
Okay, thank you guys. Niels, how do humans purchase the tickets if spinning bots have jammed up inventory?
Yeah, so humans are humans, and what the difference between a human and a bot network is basically the physical sort of presence and attributes of the human itself. And I'm pretty sure that some part of the solution to the entire issue that we're talking about here is to have a very strong connection between the identity of the user and the devices that they are using. And that is, of course, something that is technically feasible to build. And let's say if you are able to, on the internet, only operate as yourself, then you would have solved all the issues. And this is where the technology and what Distil and we are doing will help on getting it back to that specific correlation between the specific human and the devices that the specific person is actually using.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one last question. Pretty simple one, straight to the point. Kind of, how do we keep the bots away?
I think hopefully, as we've shown from the data earlier on, you know, from the research that we put together, is that bots are not going away. You know, they're there trying to exploit whatever you have put on the site, and so in ticketing they are looking for ways to gain an advantage on the system and get tickets and arbitrage them and do whatever activity they're programmed to do. Then they're not going to go away. I mean, that I think is the lesson of this. This has been an industry that has been dealing with bots for a long time, and so I think it's it's somewhat naive to think that this problem will be eradicated, but what it can be is managed and mitigated by using sort of a combination of good thinking, modern technology, using the legislation, and understanding what's out there. But it's not one. There's not one technique that's going to eliminate bots for you, because it's an arms race. Once you do one tactic to prevent a bot, they will morph into something else and change and try and evade detection the next time by doing something slightly different. That is the cat and mouse arms race game that we see every day. We're dealing with bots across many industries, so it's naive, and I would never say that this problem is going to be eradicated, but you can mitigate and manage it in better ways. Is that fair, Niels?
I think that exactly sums everything up.
Perfect. Well, I think that concludes today's event. I want to put out a big thank you to our panelists, attendees, and kind of everyone that helped put on this webinar today. So everyone have a great day, and then be on the lookout for follow-up correspondence shortly. Thanks again, everyone.